Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Melanie Gorelick. I'm the Senior Vice President of the Jewish Council for Public Affairs. And prior to coming to JCPA, I worked for 10 years as the CRC Director at Greater Metro West Foundation, and I did a lot of government affairs work. I'm really excited to be speaking with you today because I really love this part of the JCRC work. And what I hope I can relate to you is some best practices, just go over kind of bread and butter government affairs work, and then open it up for questions so that this can be a time for everyone to speak with each other and ask questions and get feedback on clarity on some of the ideas. Would it be useful if we went around and introduced ourselves so everybody can see each other? And why don't we just do really quickly who's on the call and just what community you're from. So I'll call your name so it doesn't get out. So Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren Heron from JCRC'S in Detroit.
Great. Jacob.
I'm Jacob Markey from the JCRC of the Greater Miami Jewish Federation.
Great. Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa Armoni. I'm from Jewish Federation and Family Services in Orange County, California.
Karen.
Hi, Karen Elam, JCRC Director in Rochester, New York.
Noam.
Noam Gilboard, JCRC New York.
Margot.
Hi, I'm Margot Helfand from the JCRC in Eugene, Oregon.
Mara. All right, Mara's with Buffalo. Justin.
Right.
Okay, Ohio.
We
Michelle.
also have,
Yeah. Michelle. Okay, Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel Nelson, and I work at the Jewish Federation of Greater Portland in Portland, Oregon.
Great. Cheryl.
Cheryl Nail actually doesn't have a microphone. She's from Columbia Jewish Federation in South Carolina.
Great. Maxima. Max.
Looks like Max is still muted. Max is from Seattle.
All right, Brandon. All right, and there are two numbers here I'm not familiar with. The 201 number, 983. Who's on the phone?
We also have Michelle Golan from Dallas, but I do not believe she has the 201 number.
Okay. Who's 843? Okay, and Jessica, I see you on the phone. All right. All right, let's get started. Thanks, everyone. So what I want to cover today basically is basic government affairs work for a JCRC. And then we can take it some ideas of what this looks like throughout the year, different parts of how it should be calendared into your year, different ideas of what you could consider, and then a little bit about how we make policy and how you can do some advocacy. But I really want to answer all of your questions and have an opportunity for engagement. The majority of Jewish community relation councils, of which there are 125 JCRCs, not all of them have full-time people. The majority have 1 to 3 people. About 14 of them are independent JCRCs, and they usually have more staff. So they might have 1 or more people doing government affairs work. And then about 30 or so has somebody within their federation that does JCRC work, but not full-time. So it could be a federation exec, or it could be a staff that's doing multiple other things. But there are approximately 80 JCRCs that are doing full-time JCRC work. The majority of these JCRCs also do government affairs, although there are a handful that don't because their federation does government affairs and has a separate person in another office. Usually there's a strong partnership, though, between the two. Sometimes when there's an independent JCRC, there can be a component of that JCRC that does government affairs, but the federation itself may also do government affairs. So the way that I'm going to approach this is that everyone on the call does government affairs work and is responsible for it along with someone else in their office. So the government affairs work is really, really important. And it's important on a number of levels. One is that the JCRCs play a unique role. We are one of the only Jewish groups that actually has relationships. The same staff, people, and community has the relationships with local legislators at your council, your state and council level influentials, with your state legislators, assembly and state elected officials, and with your congressional delegation. So it's really important to have the relationships at all those levels since we work at all those levels, and it's what makes us unique. Many other issue area groups are focusing on one of those areas. The second thing is that the JCRCs are respected by their legislators, especially state and national. Especially for seasoned legislators, they know that the JCRC, when we speak out on an issue or we take a position, has thought it through, has vetted it through a wide group of people, has looked at the pros and cons, and is part of a national network, and that all is very respected from a legislator. I don't know if many of you have had this experience where when the Jewish community is divided on something, you actually get a call from a legislator's office asking where the JCRC stands on this. Because for a legislator, they don't look, oh, this is AJC and they're really important on this, and ADL, they're really important on that. They're not breaking down the Jewish alphabet soup. They're saying, is the Jewish community united on something or are they divided? If they're united, then there's more strength in the position that we're taking. And if we're divided, then they can probably be more independent on how they're going to approach an issue. So the relationships and how we present ourselves and our community is really important. The other thing that we do with legislators, and that we'll get through, that I'll get to as well, is that we engage them, we educate them on issues that we believe are important. So they look to us also for education, and that's a really important role we can play. And we can engage them in our own issue advocacy campaigns, which is also something that helps them to lead, but also engages them with us. So those are the some areas of importance, why we should be engaging with legislators and what our unique value is. The other part that some JCRCs do is they work with the legislators to try to bring government grants to the Federation, and I'll get to that. It's not a role that everyone plays, but it's also an important part of having relationships with elected officials. So how is the agenda for government affairs actually created? There are two parent organizations that JCRCs have in the government affairs world. One is JCPA. We are the hub of the community relations field, and we bring together all of the JCRCs along with the 16 national agencies that are part of our membership to vet public policy new public policy issues, set policy priorities, and tackle major issues of the day. And so we convene most of that work leading up to and around our national conference this year, which is taking place in February. And then we work to implement that work throughout the year. And we work to guide you locally in the best way that we can. We sometimes request ask you to be engaged in national advocacy. And we also implement our own government affairs work nationally as well in DC, and by working in coalition with others on our public policy priority issues. JFNA also has a Washington office and does a lot of government affairs work and leads the JCRC'S on government affairs as well. The difference between JFNA and JCPA is that JFNA's work is to monitor the health and wellness of the federation system. They are there to lobby for the federation system. They want to make sure that any government grants that can come to the federation system do so. They want to make sure that any policy created does not harm the institution. So I think everyone saw this year that there was an increase in advocacy from their office on Medicaid, because if the Medicaid changes had been made, it could have really hurt Jewish Family Services, Daughters of Israel, many other of our institutions in ways that would have profoundly changed the kind of care that the federation system could have given. We couldn't have afforded those laws. They work on tax policy, charitable deduction, nonprofit security, a gamut of issues that are very specific to the federation system. There are sometimes places where JCPA issues and JFNA issues overlap, such as the Johnson Amendment, where there have been efforts to roll back separation laws that ensure the separation of church and state, especially around synagogues and what leaders in a religious institution can speak on. We've been working really closely on that. That's one area of concern, Holocaust education, and a number of other issues that we work in tag team. On those issues, JCPA is involved in interfaith coalitions. We're involved in coalitions with other civil rights and diverse organizations, where JFNA is not involved in those sorts of coalition work, because they are very specifically focused on monitoring and advocating on behalf of the system. We are taking our social work and working a common cause with others to shape America and the pluralistic society that we want to live in, the democratic society, but also to ensure the safety and security of the Jewish people. And ensuring that by ensuring that our voices and our values are part of the conversation. You know, actually, I want to stop there for 1 second, just to make sure everyone's kind of clear on the difference between JFNA and JCPA, and also how we work together, because that's one issue that we get a lot of questions on throughout the year. So if does anyone have any questions? Cool, okay.
Please also type any questions in the chat box for those of you who don't have access to a microphone.
Yes, thanks, Haya. All right, so when we're implementing our government affairs work, there are many elements to it. We recommend that the JCRC have a government affairs committee, a committee of people that's specifically thinking about these relationships. This committee could also be doing policy, but sometimes the policy people, meaning those who want to take on an issue-based policy or vet the resolutions, can be part of this, but sometimes the people who are concerned or interested with the relationships are not part of that government affairs committee. But it's good to have a group that comes together that's just thinking about government affairs when they get to the table, and that's the focus of your agenda. And in this time period, you'd focus on a number of different elements, and then I could go through them. One is building relationships with legislators. Another is voter education and forums, as well as holding high-level legislative meetings. Super Sundays and engaging legislators and other times when you're bringing federation together. Working to ensure that your JCRC committee members and federation people are appointed to committees and commissions in the government and are monitoring or at least visible local council meetings and Democratic and Republican Party meetings. Legislative breakfasts.
sorry to interrupt. There is a question that goes back to the JFNA JCPA piece.
Yep.
Do you want to address it now or go?
Well,
come
just
to
when
it?
I finish no, let me just finish this and I'll come back to it. Okay. Legislative breakfasts or forums, helping the government get grants for agencies. So those are the main, and then setting your local policy priorities. So those are the main areas of work. Let me go back to this question since I got sidetracked. Can you clarify? What, Haya?
No, that was it. Go ahead. Sorry.
Can you clarify what an independent JCRC might look like in a community which is not affiliated with the JFNA or the local federation? Who asked that question? Jessica?
That was from Mara in Buffalo.
Okay.
I'm sorry. No, that was not
That was
Mara.
from Jessica.
Sorry, I take it back. It was from
Okay.
Jessica. Sorry about that.
Okay. So Jessica, just to quickly answer that and we can come back to it, there would be two elements. One is even if you're an independent JCRC and you're not affiliated with JFNA, I would still let them know about your existence and get on their email blast list, because the issues that they monitor should be issues that you are informed about, and there might be some potential benefit to you depending on what your local priorities are. But additionally, you would probably follow along further with the JCRC work. And in terms of the the JCPA policy priorities, as well as setting your own local policy priorities. But a lot of the work is the same, of building the relationships, bringing together legislators, mapping out what you want to accomplish in those relationships, and getting them involved in areas of importance to you. So you still play an important role as a diverse community board that you care what the legislator thinks and wants to be respected by them, and the work that you do. So I hope that's helpful. Okay. So let me just go back quickly. It's important that you map out your relationship with legislators, that you know who in your federation knows who, and who knows the Congress people. Who's the person that can get on the phone with anyone at the state legislators, the assembly legislators. It's not that they have to be on your JCRC, but it's good to have a very friendly relationship with them, and that they can be a bridge for you. I suggest that you go meet if you don't know them already, you should know your Congress people personally. They should be able to recognize you and your chair person, maybe your exec, and if there's somebody who's leading your government affairs work. Having these relationships with your Congress people is really important. If you're in a state where there are a lot of JCRCs, this is a place where you can work together when you go meet your senators or if you want to meet your governor. But it's really important that they know who you are, what your policy priorities are for the year, that they hear from you throughout the year, and that they're invited to speak several times a year, whether they come or not, to something that you're doing. This engages them with you. The other thing is that we are really, really, really going to be promoting this, encouraging this, asking that you really do this over the next 3 years, which is have voter education. One of the things JCRCs are known for all over the country is getting the Jewish community out to vote. Make sure that they're the most educated interest group about what the major issues are, that they're focused on what the issues are of importance for the community for the upcoming election, and that the wider community knows the candidates' positions. And this all really comes into the world of the JCRC. So we're encouraging everybody to do that. We put out an election guide that you should be getting by the end of August, but it's also the time when you need to start setting up your voter forms, getting out your invitations. We strongly encouraging working with the other Jewish groups that are part of the JCPA tent. So if they're local in your community, so if you have a local AJC, a local ADL, a local NCJW, again, when the Jewish community presents itself unified on policy, it actually gives a stronger message to the legislators. Well, first of all, it helps you get the candidates to come to your community. Remember, candidates are being invited by everybody in time for elections. But the JCRC should be the place that they want to go. It should be, that they know if they're coming to you, they're hitting all these other groups, ADL, AJC, NCJW, the wider Jewish community. They're going to get in your paper. They should know the distribution of your paper. And so they should be the people that you want to know. That they're going to talk to, and you need to find out who's running their campaigns and that you know that person who's running their campaigns. So a date should be set, a prominent place should be set for where to have it. We will send you questions that we think are priority, but it's good to vet those questions with your local organizing group to make sure they represent your local priorities as well. Usually you have like an Israel question, maybe another international. 5 questions is usually like the max. What we did at Metro West, is because we always had more than 5 questions, is we also had worked with our local paper, which we strongly encouraged, to do a questionnaire that we would send to the legislators and say, okay, you have 200 words to answer these 12 questions. And then we would get their responses, and then some of them would go in the paper, but they'd all go on the web, and then they would get circulated widely. So if you have a wide email blast, you are informing and educating your whole community. These are the major issues that your JCRC thinks are important for the upcoming election, and these are the candidates' positions. It's a very strong education opportunity for a JCRC. And during elections, people are paying attention to, what they can to help determine what's best for them. In the current situation of polarization, I think it's really plays a wonderful role to focus on issues that have been vetted by the wider Jewish community instead of accepting something is left or something is right or however somebody wants to determine it. No, this has been vetted by the wider Jewish community. This is important to us locally as a Jewish community, to our board, and these are the questions that we're putting forward and educating you on. In addition to the voter educate, now sometimes congressional candidates or even any candidates, governmental candidates, gubernatorial candidates don't want to come and debate. That's okay. You can do something that's called a sequential, where you invite the candidates at the same time, but one comes at 2 and one comes at 3, and you repeat the questions. The important thing is to get them in front of people. And if you cannot get them to come at the same time, it's okay also to have them come speak to a high-level group, a smaller closed-door group, but so they know it's not off the record. So, and that would not be at the same time, or you can do both. But the better thing, the ideal thing would be to get them out in front of the community. Now, you don't want to have a lot of them. So in terms of depending on how many districts you cover, if you cover 1 district or 2 districts, it's much easier to determine, okay, we'll do one for representatives to the House. But if you cover a wide district, you might mostly want to look at which are the more contentious races where it would make a difference for your community. But still give everyone the chance to be part of the newspaper questions. So, seeing. The other part of doing candidate and voter education is encouraging people to get out the vote. So one of the things is to providing them with links and opportunities to register, make sure they're registered. Then you can also do that in partnership with other diverse groups, but you should send emails, put something in your paper, put something in your email blast, make it user-friendly for people so that they know what to do. And then see what your JCRC wants to do the day of to help get people to vote. for some people, the elderly, and others, it's sometimes hard to get to the voting booth. Or just make sure that, people have their cards to do, voting ahead of time and get it in the mail in time. And that's an important role that JCRCs have played, I think, since the beginning of our field. So I encourage that. Now, there are other communities that that are really working on get out the vote, like the African American community. And you might want to work with your partners to see what they're doing and to see where the Jewish community might want to come out and be part of their efforts. So I know that NAACP, this is one of their biggest initiatives this year because they felt that a lot of African American, especially African American men, did not come out to vote. And so they have a big initiative. They actually have a conference that's going in July where this is one of the major focuses of that conference. So there are areas as well that we care about for people to, for your community to engage. Okay. Does anyone have any questions on anything that I've covered so far? Disagreements, questions? All right. Okay. The other thing to think about are opportunities to get legislators to community programs that you're doing. Opportunities like Super Sundays, which most federations still do. The JCRC can play a strong role. It could be a time to invite your legislators to come to the Super Sunday, to see your community in action. If your Super Sunday, is all taking place in one place and it's also a community day, you could have a special table where they sit, cards already pulled for them to call. You can have a desk where they come in, where your CRC members are there to greet them, walk with them, handle them the whole time. Do not leave them alone. You don't want people coming up and asking about when the tree's being removed on their street. I mean, you want your JCRC members or any high-level person to talk about your issues with them casually, but you want others to just meet and greet them and not do their own personal business at that time. But many of them love it. Like, they love it. They love making the call. They love saying, I came out to do something for the Jewish community. The Federation's helping the most vulnerable. I support this work. And it gives you also an important role to play within your Federation. So you can also have a packet for them and some of your positions. It's a really, really nice time to build relationships and show your value. So I highly recommend that, and you could think about whether there are other opportunities like that in your Federation corridor throughout the year, because each one is different. I also mentioned, and I think it's really important at this time to note that over time, the Jewish community has been less engaged in local policy work, local councils, local commissions, showing up at local meetings, because many of the JCRCs aren't located in cities anymore. We're just kind of more involved with what's happening at the congressional level, what's happening on Israel, what's happening on some of the major issues. But where many of our diverse partners are doing their work is at the local level, on housing, criminal justice reform, voting rights. Many of these are really taking place at the local SNAP, hunger-related concerns, at the local and state level. And we would really like to encourage kind of a re-engagement at these levels. So to know the players, to join in coalitions and work in common cause on some of the issues, to have people who already understand the wide, policy agenda of the community relations field to be appointed to committees or commissions, and to keep you kind of posted on what the major issues are that are going on at the local level. it's something, especially when you're not a lot of staff, it's really, where do you put your time? But if you can kind of get your government affairs committee to have people who want to give their time in these circles, and you're just leading them from behind, you're just supporting them, you can have more people out there, and then they monitor these places for you, and then they give you a heads up if there's something you should know or if there's an opportunity for the Federation. But it's something that I wanted to underscore as well, and sometimes there are more difficulties there. It's not as, we don't know it as well sometimes as we know how to work with our Congress people, which are also important. We're here to help on any of those issues. But I see there's a comment here in the chat. Our JCRC is working with NAACP in Miami. We're the only Jewish organization in this coalition, but it's an easy way to get involved and form relationships. That's great. Mara, Jacob, what is the issue that you're working with NAACP?
So this is just on voter registration. And so it's literally just like showing up at a Starbucks. And what we're trying to do is even getting a few lay leaders or from women's philanthropy or in the areas and just showing up. And that's a very, very small thing. We're very much taking a back seat, but we're able then to kind of demonstrate the support because you never know where that could help pay off down the line too.
That's great. That's a really good, really, really good example. The other things, I don't know if everyone does this, but many do as well. So it's part of like the corridor of it, which are legislative breakfasts or legislative dinners, meetings, where you bring together, you invite your legislators to come to speak with your leaders on priority issues. So the older model had been, you invite all the congressional delegation and the state assemblymen and women who are in the districts that you cover, and then other influential people locally. But sometimes when you do that, when you're meshing everyone together, it's harder to focus on what your fight for, let's say, priority issues are and what you actually want to accomplish. So if your goal is to kind of have an event where all the influentials show up and it's more meet and greet and hobnobbing, and you're able to say, well, these are our big broad brush issues, then it's good to mesh everyone together. If you actually kind of want to do more specific policy, with an outcome and build relationships, then it's good to kind of segment them. So one example is, don't involve your congressional delegation. Have separate way of engaging with them. The voter education, going to see them when they're in district meetings, going to DC once a month, but really showing up, and show up in August. We'll have our toolkit out soon. I'm sure you're getting other toolkits, and go meet your congressman. Let them know you're going to come and have a conversation with them and create your personal relationships. Have other opportunities for them to address your community. Then you can have at your legislative breakfast state level people. And that really provides an opportunity to really get to know the state people. Because like I said, things are moving towards the state right now, and those are important folks to know. So whether, one thing that you could do to help figure out your local agenda is be in touch with the heads of the agencies in your area to say, what are the major issues that you're facing? And, and listen. So let's say it's SNAP or domestic violence or, unintended circumstances from domestic violence, or it could be Medicaid, whatever it is. See where there's some major issues that also overlap with what your CRC thinks is important, and then engage those agency execs in your in the setting of the legislative meeting and also in speaking. Because when you're with the legislators and you could come with personal stories about not only the impact of something on the community at large, those who are most vulnerable, but if you can also say this is how it impacts the Jewish community, and they hear it from somebody working day and day on the concerns, it also has a big impact. But the legislative forums are really wonderful, and they're great opportunities, you know, to say this is really what's important to us, have real conversations. So it's not just frontal presentation, but there should be time to also hear the legislators' priorities too. What do they want to share with you? And you share with them, and then you can see if you want to do something together to follow up. So for example, what I did in Metro West is one year it was really SNAP, it was hunger. The food pantry, Jewish food pantry was running out of food, and there were cuts to SNAP. And the end of that conversation was an agreement by the legislators at the state level who came to do a food stamp challenge. And it was really cool. We ended up having 17 New Jersey legislators take the food stamp challenge today. So for 1 week, they lived, what was it, on like $3 a day or something. I mean,
I think it was 17 for the week.
17 for the week. And we did press conferences, we did op-eds together with the legislators, and then they knew not only did the JCRC care about the issue or advocate on something, we gave them something where they shined, right? They publicly were the leaders on something, it was bipartisan, on something that we cared about. So we engaged them in an issue advocacy campaign. Another year, there was an issue about domestic violence. That's why I mentioned it earlier, because domestic violence isn't always on our top agenda. Although JCPA did pass a resolution 2 years ago on the topic, but all these legislators were putting forward a lot of bills on domestic violence because they like look good to their constituents. But then our Rachel coalition that was actually in the courts were having to like run after these bills to be stopped because they had negative and unintended consequences. And they said, how come these legislators aren't coming to us before they drop a bill? And so what we did is we had to look at why, and we ended up folding the Jewish community into the domestic violence kind of lobby, which there was the people who were getting money for shelters and who were the people who the legislators went to weren't the people on the courts. And so we ended up doing leading up and did a national forum. And it was a state forum. It was really very interesting. So we built relationships with all diverse communities. We had a lot of legislators that wanted to show up and local officials, and ended up changing how work was done and made a difference for something that our Metro West Federation cared about, which was our Rachel Coalition. So those are just two ideas that I wanted to share to kind of make it real. Another area, though, is criminal justice reform. I'm hoping that you're all engaging with us on criminal justice reform. Most of the work that needs to be done is at the state level, and we are about to roll out a campaign to really focus on bail reform. But as you see in our toolkit, we are really encouraging people to find out, the JCRC's, what's happening locally in your communities with those who are most impacted, to see where you can be helpful. Is it in areas of representation? Are there coalitions existing that you can already be sitting on and helping? Like Jacob mentioned, just being in the room sometimes makes the difference. Is there, are we building relationships with those who are who this is real to them? Criminal justice reform, and they're trying to transform laws. So that's a really good, those people are checking out what's going on in the city council, because the decisions they make regarding housing, voting, schools, education, security in schools, things like that, those are where those decisions are made. And again, at the state level is also where they're dealing with prisons, sentencing reform, re-entry support, bail, cash bail, all of those issues are happening there. So because the Jewish community hasn't been outspoken on these issues, now that we are starting to speak out and be engaged, there's a different recognition of the issues. Why do we care? Because we are known for our civil rights and thoughtful work, and we're saying there's something in our system that isn't just. So that is something that, more encouragement for the state level work. let me stop there and ask if there's anything else you actually would like me to address specifically that I haven't addressed. Karen, is there anything that you would like me to address?
Yeah, I was trying to unmute.
Okay.
So I think Melanie asked that question because we had her, we had David and Melanie here last November, beginning of November, to do an advocacy training for us with our JCRC group, but also our federation, people that wanted to come and learn more about advocacy. And it was also to help us kick off a government affairs committee that has been kind of not as active as I would like. And I don't know if you or frankly others on the call can offer any kind of advice. Everywhere, sort of, it's a committee of about 8 or 9 with 2 co-chairs that are very well intentioned and not very proactive. So I find myself really trying to continually rev up the group. So I guess one thing is, if anybody has advice, aside from trying to find new co-chairs, which I'm finding incredibly difficult to do in this community. But the other piece I'm hoping might be infuse a little energy is that we're really, my JCRC chair and I are very intent on doing work around voting. And I have the good fortune of a summer intern that's doing a good amount of research for me. One of the biggest things is I don't want to reinvent the wheel, and I don't have capacity to do things on my own. So I'm looking for groups like the League of Women Voters that are already planning candidate forums, et cetera, and how can we sort of piggyback on those. I'm hoping to do a fair amount of communicating to the community. We were talking about a strategic communications plan around the importance of voting, sort of a weekly message to folks. But really, I would love to hear what if others are thinking about doing this kind of work. I really, the urgency is obvious. And I think it's a place that I could get my group engaged in a way I just for some reason haven't been able to get them engaged. I thought we were going to do a lot more legislative visits. We've only done 2 in a year. We do our legislative lunch, which is very successful, but that's not enough. So again, I'm hoping that maybe the voting stuff, and I'll stop there and just see if there are others that have any advice.
The only issue about doing it with League of Women Voters, which, a lot of times it's crossover of people, a lot of Jews are on that, is that sometimes it's not completely the same agenda. So if you're trying to share, one of the message purposes of it is, this is the Jewish community's vetted agenda, you kind of lose that. What you could do if you don't think you would get a lot of people out, really, or it's a lot of work, you could then pivot to more of a high level meeting, with high level Jewish community members, and support the League of Women Voters if they would take a couple of your questions and if you're fully comfortable with their issues, so that you are in multiple places.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing is, it's true, there's crossover, and we also have a very active NCJW chapter here. Mm-hmm. And there's crossover there as well. But I completely get your point. And the other thing we have talked about, my chair and I, is, which isn't as, I don't find, it's not as dynamic, but is to send out a questionnaire to the candidates and then get their responses and publish that. Yeah,
2 things. One is NCJW, I totally think you should partner with. Mm-hmm. Again, NCJW, ADL, AJC, whoever the alphabet soup that's under this, that's not a one issue organization, that's kind of under the tent, would be great to partner with. The getting it out, the questionnaire reaches probably more people than everybody.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yep.
Especially if you put it on like your listserv or your web with pictures of that, you have to do some visual and you have to do a word count or it will become unwieldy.
Okay.
But yeah, because that you can just keep promoting over.
Right.
Just make sure you have, either you have the answers from both candidates, or you say, we gave both candidates
Right.
a deadline.
Yeah.
This one met the deadline.
Right.
You know, you just have to be clear why if you don't have both of them.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't do, okay, these are the Democrats this week and this is the Republican another
Right.
week. Because people, you know, may not get the next week. So.
So I don't want to monopolize all the time, but I do have one other question. And again, it's to you, Melanie, but really anybody in the group. We also really want to do some type of get out the vote activity. And I'm really feeling at a loss for how to kick. I think I'm a little afraid of kicking something off that I can't see through completely. I'm a staff of one. I should have volunteers that can help me, but I tend to have volunteers that are just, if I'm not sort of doing all of the planning and organizing, but it even goes a little beyond that. It's sort of like, come on team, we can do this. It doesn't get done. But I feel like this could be a way for us to engage younger people too. We really, our JCRC it skews towards older, and we're constantly saying, why can't we get younger people? And I think it's because we're not doing the activism that I think we could and should be doing. So I'm just wondering if there are people that have plans or advice.
Leslie, and then Jacob.
Okay. I was going to say, we are in the same, kind of in a similar boat. And so we're trying to reach out to different younger groups that are focused more on younger people in terms of engaging them around the vote. And election year is particularly a good time to get people who are, you know, interested in that sort of stuff re-energized. So, you know, like we have a new group. We have a couple different groups that we're going to be working with. We're also going to, I'm trying to find some of our young professional groups. We have an JCRC'S group. We have a number of those that I'm trying to do reaching out to them to see what they're going to be doing, if they'd be interested in joining us for something like that. Like, you know, that is definitely an issue. And I think that for me, it's just an issue. I just have to just make the phone call and just say, hey, you know, we'd like to do this. We want your input. We'd like to join up with you guys. And that's what we're trying to do is just trying to broaden our search a little bit in terms of just going to them and to the groups that we're interested in working with. Try to get some of that. The other thing that came to me is if you know anybody who's actually involved in the election within the individual campaigns themselves, even though you have to be careful about balance, that's oftentimes where you'll find a lot of energy as well, because they're really geared up for the election itself. So they may have some more resources or, you know, other volunteers that would be more interested.
Thank you, Jacob.
Yeah, I want to echo a lot of what was just said. Look and see in the Federation if there's the Young Leadership Division in the Federation. We're looking for what we're doing with the NAACP. We have a Repair the World chapter here that is, you know, about a year old. We can send an email blast out. If there's a Moshe House, you know, different areas and different sub-communities to look at. If there's one of the congregations, maybe they have a large young leadership program, maybe that can get sent out. You know, anyway, I think that to develop the contacts, again, like that was just said, and also even other departments at the Federation. If there's, you know, again, my contacts that my supervisor has with the head of the Women's Philanthropy group. The Women's Philanthropy sent an email out saying, hey, we'd be interested in what could happen, and maybe some older people who are retired but just love the social action, you know, side of things. It's a way to kind of build in and also build support for the JCRC within the organization itself, which also could be strong moving forward to expose people, or maybe they haven't been exposed already.
Yeah, and I want to just add to this. Right now, the teens who are involved in gun violence are taking the lead and get out the vote. I would also reach out to your teen program people, you know, and get the teens out there doing it, like work with them, get them in front of the grocery store and the synagogues. And, you know, it was mentioned, but, you know, maybe the synagogues are starting to do this as well. But I think those are your go-to right now, because that was their big ask. The other thing is that you could probably cut and paste from either past years, or Women League of Voters would have all the information on how to vote with all of that. I'm sure that they're sending it around or they're going to, so you can cut and paste it, tweak it to your own, wording. And if you're part of a state of multiple JCRCs and you have relationships, you might want to do that collectively as well. So you can make one nice email blast and then share it together, all the JCRCs in your state, and then send it out with your names on it. So you can leverage, the work that each of you are doing. All right. So Mara, I don't know if any of you see in the chat room, Mara said that she was encouraged from the Parkland students, and they have started doing work with the Baptist Church on, they did a joint creative visit with the Baptist Church to a new Niagara Falls Underground Railroad Museum, and voter registration will be available, encouraged. The idea came from seeing Parkland students at JCPA conference. They required it. So, does anyone have any other questions? Okay. So what I thought I would just touch on, we only have a few more minutes, is how JCPA creates policy and then setting public policy priorities. I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows the vetting system. So every year, JCPA passes resolutions. Where do these resolutions come from?
Melanie?
Yes.
Sorry, it's Karen. I don't mean to interrupt, but Michelle sent an interesting question that I thought I wanted to call your attention to.
Okay. A question on how to work with other local Jewish organizations. How do you suggest handling the challenges of wanting to work with the other local Jewish organs on legislative issues, but our issues are not all aligned? Okay. Michelle, where are you located again? Dallas. Okay. So the first group of Jewish organizations that I would reach out to are the ones that are under the JCPA umbrella. ADL, AJC, NCJW, Hadassah, the Jewish Women International, Labor Committee, and people representing the RAC and the other religious streams. So we can, if you don't have these on you, we can send you who they are. All of those groups are part of setting the JCPA resolutions. They all vet the resolutions. In fact, many of their national people are helping to write them and lead the actual focus of them. So that's how I would start, is reaching out to them and going through where do you overlap on prioritizing these concerns, because their policy should be similar. Now, sometimes, let's say, for example, the Supreme Court nomination. So JCPA, we do have a resolution on being able to speak out on a Supreme Court judicial nominee, but we never have in our history. And really, we're probably not going to, even though for some of us, it's really, really hard. But for some, it's not. So what JCPA has done in the past, and what we're considering doing again, is putting out questions that we would want a senator to consider when they're vetting whether or not this person should be a Supreme Court justice. You may or may not have seen that AJC also recently did that. They put out a list of questions, and they made it clear, they don't get into the partisan mix, but these are important questions for this time. However, if you were going to work with NCJW on a voters forum, there's no reason why they couldn't ask a question about the Supreme Court. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's a way to get started when you are working with the other Jewish community members. And I encourage you to have them on your JCRC, have the other communities that are in the JCPA tent. The local people should, or I highly recommend and encourage you to have them on your JCRC, they're a member of the Jewish community. If they live and work in your district, where you work, your catchment area, it's nice to have them there. You probably all have less staff than you want, so you can leverage resources together when it makes sense. And it's your tables, so it's nice to have them at your table. In terms of like issue-only groups, let's say, I don't know. I don't want to say. Okay, an issue, like if it's an Israel group, why not have them on your Israel committee? But that doesn't mean they're on your JCRC, but they can still be on your committees. If it's a social action group, why not have them on a social action committee, whatever you call it, social action, social justice, local initiative, you know, but they're not the ones actually vetting and setting your policy priorities or dealing with any action components. They could be brainstorming ideas, programs, education for the field, things like that. So you're kind of cutting where we're kind of drawing the line of people's involvement, but you are involving everybody. Almost everybody, unless they cross the red line, which Noam's on here and we can ask him who the red line is if anyone's interested. Okay, is that helpful? Did I answer that question okay? Okay. All right.
Melanie, I have a quick question.
Yep.
So we have a pretty active Jewish Voices for Peace here that kind of shows up a fair amount. And so in conversation, we've talked about that we don't want that to be the only Jewish voice kind of out there, you know, at these different events or, you know, in the ear of legislators. So I'm trying to make a concerted effort to kind of balance that, to try to be present. But at what point does it look like we're in conjunction with them? Like, how do I differentiate us from, you know what I'm saying, like from that group? Like, I'm afraid of becoming associated with them because if we show up to kind of balance their views and then, you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. Noam, do you want to weigh in on that?
If they show up to like a rally or something, what's the?
well, so far that's where we've just seen them. We just see them a lot showing up at rallies, and we have one particular person here who's just very active. So, and you know, it's I don't know. I feel like if I'm just trying to be there as a representative too, I also don't want us all to get lumped together. So I don't know quite how to do that. I guess just through messaging and just talking to people and just being very clear about that.
It's not a simple answer in my.
Okay, well we can table it till later time.
No. It's a fun one, but it's not simple. Like, in every community is going to be different because every community has a different organization of Jewish Voice for Peace or various anti-Israel groups within their mix. Generally, what I've seen across the board is that federations and JCRCs have adopted language saying the broad mainstream of the Jewish community supports two-state solution, Israel's right to defend itself, blah, blah, blah. And that differentiates from Jewish Voice for Peace. It's also, Jewish Voice for Peace also, I think Doug Kahn said this, that it's not really a Jewish organization, it's hardly much of a voice, and it's certainly not peaceful. That's another one. But just in terms of so that people don't conflate the work you do with them, side conversations are always good. And when it comes to Middle East issues, it will be very clear what side both groups are on.
Okay.
And also, JVP is not going to be on your JCRC.
No.
Also, I think what Noam is saying, I'm underscoring too, are the side conversations. And also you're expressing concern about their involvement. And IAN could also be able to help you with that. I think they've been guiding a few other communities on that specifically. So Stephanie at IAN can do that, but we don't want to make it easy, like, okay, they're a member, we're a member. Like, we have to show concern about their agenda and integrity on the cause. And remember, you represent the community. So the more, the more vetting that you've done of the wider community of diverse voices, they have a very focused interest group. You're a wider community of people who care as well. we can demonstrate a lot of ways about caring about the most vulnerable, caring about Israel, caring about concerns in Israel, nuanced approaches. So it doesn't have to be like, well, they're critical of Israel, therefore they're bad. No, we have a nuanced approach, but we don't believe that they support, that they actually care about Israel's, the future existence of Israel as a Jewish state. So learning a nuanced language in that area. Noam, I noticed here, I'm sorry, I'm multitasking, but you said simply dealing with turf issues. Could you explain?
You know what, sometimes organizations have different stated priorities, but they both try and reach the same person. Like I'm just here in the mishpacha, I have so many problems with AJC stepping all over our toes. At one point, whenever we took a mission to Israel, they would ask for the names and the contact info of the participants so that they could then go reach out. And it's like, what are you doing? So my question is, what is the proper way to deal with, if JCRC is supposed to represent a broad umbrella and we're the spokes organization for the Jewish community, I think that's nationwide, what happens when, one of the beautiful flowers in our garden isn't playing the right way and, taking over responsibilities that, you are that you're knee deep in?
Right.
I don't have a good answer.
So and I'm assuming you've spoken to them about it in a nice, polite way. And they're just not respecting that.
Yep. Yeah, there's all sorts of weirdness, but I'm sure I'm not the only community that faces this.
You're not at all. But what I would suggest is just stay strong and steady in your lane, right? Because in the end, again, we're representing a much bigger community. I personally may not give them the names and just say I'd be happy to provide them with information. I'm not comfortable, or we have policy.
We ain't doing that anymore.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, but there's nothing you can actually do, but you're the one creating the trip. You're the one creating the relationships. You can also be the one to explain to whoever the people are who AJC is in the gamut of ABC, whatever, all the lists. But it's good to have an AJC person on your, on your organizing board, because then, then you say, oh, they're on my organizing board. They're part of our Big Tent table. They want to reach out to you on this. We're going to be the liaison, the interlocutors. And so then it doesn't matter what they're doing, because they're part of the bigger community that you are facilitating. So it's like kind of putting yourself on, there. I mean, it's really hard to be able to compete with some of AJC's resources right now, especially in New York, where, but, that's the different thing is just the messaging, the creation of the relationship with the diverse groups, the explaining of the relationships to the people they may reach out to, and taking credit for your work. Oh, you like what we did? Yeah, that took this long for us to create it. We'd love to work with you on it. Just like keep kind of also in a friendly way taking ownership of what's yours. Hopefully that's helpful. Okay. All right. Keep just keep our vision. Like, this is who we are. This is what we're working for. That no one else can be a JCRC. And, as long as we can stay strong and steady, we have a very, very unique role. So to sum up kind of where I started, we have a very unique role. And I just strongly encourage the relationship with the legislators, because different than all the Jewish groups, we're focused on the local, state, and national. And sometimes we think some of their agendas don't necessarily relate to our priority issues, but those relationships mean everything. And especially if we could get Jews, even running for office, or if you have a JCRC member who somebody who was a member who's an elected official, you know your access, right? They know your issues, they know your access, they know what you could do. Like, we want our people with our agendas running for office. We want them appointed to commissions. We want to know where we can influence, because we want to ensure that we have a wonderful society where we live freely, where people are helping the most vulnerable, that we can pray, and everybody, has the opportunity of freedom of prayer, of safety and security. And with everything going on, I think we're a stronger voice and, almost to when we started. We have a strong role to play, and we can't let people unravel us because of partisan politics. So I know it's a lot, but it can be exciting, and you can't do it all in one day, Karen. I know you can't, but little by little, it's all good. And, you'd be surprised how many people in your federation could get you to any elected official right now if you actually needed them. So that's part of it, is like, we can't do it all and you can't do it all, but to map out for yourself who knows who and how do you get that person to make the call, lift the phone, bring the person. That's sometimes enough, because, they respect the JCRC, they're a federation member. You need somebody, why wouldn't they help you? You put them up there, you let them introduce, you let them be the macher. You can reach people.
Melanie, a corollary to that we've been working on is that we have, we sit primarily in one county, Monroe County. Our legislator, our congresswoman was Louise Slaughter, who sadly passed away. But we have some of our federation donors that live in districts, in county areas that are districts, that are adjacent to us. And so one of the things that we've been working on is identifying who those folks are, so that we can go on visits to those Congress people that so that it's their constituents that are speaking with them.
Perfect. What we did at some point, we had liaison to every district. We had one appointed person in every district, because in every district there's someone in your federation that cares about what's happening in their local area. There just is. That's why they're part of their federation too. Like, they care. So there's somebody who you just need that one person to say, if I need something, do you want to be on my CRC Government Affairs Committee? But even if you don't, can I contact you about when I need something there? Would you help us set up a meeting and come with us? Because that's the mapping out of mapping your assets, and they're there. They're there in your community. You just need to know who they are, and then know what. And I think the broader, more districts you can get into right now, the better. Because what the Jewish community stands for, what your federation is doing, where our money goes, what the JCPA is doing, what we care about, these are really, really important messages, and it's time for legislators to hear them and to know that they also have a constituency that would want to get their messages out if they are on the same page as us, or even if they're not, to let us know why.
Right.
All right, I think that we're coming to the close. Is there anything else? Well, I'm happy to speak about this with any of you, or to get back onto a webcast call. As you probably can tell, it's one of my favorite topics and areas of work. So I can talk about it for a long time. And, if I can help support you in any way, get you going on anything, whether it's an issue topic or it's, just a how-to, please feel free to be in contact. And if you have any ideas for any webinars that could be helpful, please let us know. For example, when the Gaza situation was happening, we spoke with Karen and a few others who said, we'd really like a 101 again to just go over this. It's very complicated, and we just, would like to know more about X or Y, and we are easily able to do that. That's one way that we want to be able to service all of you and make your work easier. So just be in touch, and thank you for giving us this bit of time.
Thank you.
And come to Israel. If you want to come to Israel on our mission, we need to know by the 27th. They gave us a very short deadline this year. But come.
Can you work on my Federation executive to let me come back, please?
Yeah, yes. Send me her email.
Bye.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.